My name is Paula Paul. I help people with tech. I've had lots of adventures in all sorts of tech. And I would normally be giving this talk with Ms. Rosemary Wang from HashiCorp, who is going to be here tomorrow. I highly recommend you catch her talk on secrets management and Kubernetes. It's a good one. And I am especially happy to be back after 5 years. I spoke at the very first DevOps Days in Charlotte, and I did a diversity talk. I had a little retrospective. If you'd like to check out what I've done since then, I've got a little blog about it, if you remember Prezi and Flash. So this talk is building a service delivery infrastructure, and Rosemary and I have had a lot of heart-to-hearts about this because the word infrastructure to me sounds very monolithic. And I've spent a lot of time over the past years decomposing old code and pulling it apart. And I'm like, why do we still call it infrastructure? Because it's really an ecosystem of capabilities. But no matter what you call it, I mean, what is it? Most of the people that I work with kind of live in this gooey middle of we're trying to build business capabilities and applications, and we're delivering our value that way. But if you look at the entire value chain, everybody wants to figure out a measure of their business value. You know, as CIO is like, what are my metrics? How do I demonstrate I'm delivering business value? And that business value comes through some capabilities that you're delivering in code, services and applications, but those things have to live on a delivery ecosystem. I'm trying to eradicate the word infrastructure. And if you think about that term in real life, so if I wanted to buy a hat, too early to bend down. In real life, I go to Amazon, I click a button, buy a hat. There's a whole ecosystem of suppliers, warehouses, freight, last mile delivery. All of those capabilities get that hat to me at my house in some box someday. And the same thing in tech. If I'm the person that wrote the app, that I click the button, hat magically gets delivered to me. There is an ecosystem of build pipelines and conformance testing and infrastructure and storage that allows me to deliver that value. So if you are either trying to build a service delivery ecosystem or you want to evaluate the one that you have, it's always good to start with an MVP. And my favorite one is Hello Customer. I usually go in, and I've done this at a number of companies now, that I'll say, if I'm a new developer here and I'm starting tomorrow morning, I want to sit in a conference room and I want you to give me a standard build developer's laptop, and I want you to give me access to a repo. And from that README, I should be able to build a REST endpoint that, given some identifier like an account number, I should be able to return hello customer name, so hello Paula. And at the companies I've worked with, I mean, I should ask, but it goes anywhere from 3 weeks to, like, one company was 6 months, because you might have to provision environments and so forth. So as a developer, you know, in order to do that, if you sat me in a conference room at your company, I might have to do service desk tickets. I might have to pick up the phone and call somebody because there's no repo that tells me how to do that. And if I get really frustrated, I'll just pull out a credit card and buy a cloud subscription and build it. So when I think about the service delivery ecosystem, as a developer, I'll put my developer hat on. Sorry to be stereotypical. It's a hoodie. So as a developer, I just want to be productive, right? I don't want to have to, you know, open up service desk tickets, and I want to be able to get at least something built on my local laptop and promote it to a lower environment, like a QA environment, without a lot of friction. And I am also used to getting my requirements given to me in terms of these agile narratives. So I would turn it around and say, you know, as a developer, let me express my needs this way. And secrets management is a good example. So as a developer, I want access to securely manage my secrets in an automated fashion so that I can avoid exposing sensitive information that shouldn't be exposed. Seems pretty good. And I take it even further. As a developer, I see all of these nice software engineering practices that I'm used to, and I'm like, I could apply this to the needs of my service delivery ecosystem. Instead of infrastructure, I'm going to do some domain-driven design, break it apart. I'm going to do thin slicing and do an MVP of hello customer on the service delivery infrastructure, and I'm going to have all the nice things like Yagni or you're not going to need it, so I don't wind up with a big service mesh before anybody knows why. And agile infrastructure sounds like pretty good. Even further, you can break infrastructure into products that could be managed as products if you're into product management with customers and the whole deal. And if you look at any of the major cloud vendors' consoles, you can see that they're basically giving you a set of products that allow you to deliver your applications. So if you start to think of traditional infrastructure this way, and even further, applying product management, what are the major journeys that a developer needs from the delivery ecosystem? Path to production. How do I get something simple that doesn't even do anything, a hello world, through the promotion environments to a higher environment? Maybe there's some additional gates around production. But how automated and self-service can that be? Once it's in production, how do I repair it? Where are my logs aggregated? What's my debugging experience? Can I actually create metrics and alerts so that a scaling event happens automatically and it's self-repairing? And then last but not least, compliance and security. How do I identify and authorize users? How do I make sure that my secrets aren't exposed? And what's my vulnerability management capability on this thing? And at that point, I would turn to Rosemary, who on this particular adventure, this talk was based on an adventure that we had together for about over a year. And I would turn to Rosemary. I'd be, Rosemary, all this infrastructure is code now. It's like, great, we can apply software engineering principles to it all. And she would go, as an infrastructure engineer, I just want to reclaim my nights and weekends. I don't want to be some kind of expert developer, domain-driven design. I don't do that kind of stuff. And I really don't want to be a hero operator anymore. And it turns out, if you don't get overwhelmed by all the excitement of infrastructure as code and applying software engineering to it, you could start small and just think about how easily you can have a developer promote hello world from one environment to another, and how many of those kind of manual waiting points you can remove. And then in addition, as someone who's experimenting or working with infrastructure as code, you have the same needs. If you're building a Kubernetes cluster, you have to have your own delivery pipeline. You have to have your own environment. So you have many of the same needs as the people building business capability applications. You can begin to express those in these agile narratives. You can put them on a board. You can prioritize and refine them. And in the example of building a Kubernetes cluster, your build pipeline looks a lot like any other application, because you can have automated unit testing, conformance tests of all manner, some examples here, and automated promotion through higher environments. Okay, so I could get and have gotten kind of traditional infrastructure engineers behind this sort of thing, but another group that I work with quite often is enterprise architects. They're a tough bunch. So as an architect, what does all this mean to me? Architects want to champion the architecturalities, scalability, reliability, cross-cutting concerns, ivory tower, sometimes. And when I talk to enterprise architects, I'm like, can you express some of those needs in these agile narratives, and can you put some code behind it? And it's actually an opportunity now, if we all have build pipelines, to introduce some tests or conformance tests in the build pipeline to just check and have those kind of guardrails for developers saying, maybe we don't want to promote something to production if it hasn't been audited in 90 days. If we want to have some kind of check that raises an alert if we're trending more than 1% failure on deployment. And these things can be put in code. I'm losing my mic. Sorry about that. So I think as I put infrastructure folks in the position of saying, infrastructure is code, I also do this to architects. Architecture is code. And also, it means an architect should be able to care about the whole value chain, not just the GUI middle part of services and applications. They should care about the efficacy of the delivery ecosystem that gets them there. And to me, that's what DevOps is. It's everybody knows who their customers are through the whole value chain, and everybody has a natural way to express their needs, prioritize those needs, and deliver capability incrementally. One more hat. Actually, this is my favorite hat. It's kind of cool. So as a CX, CIO, CTO, CDTO, all that good stuff, they are having some kind of balancing act because it's likely they're getting demands for demonstrable business value, measurable business value, but they're also balancing, when I wake up Monday and suddenly my log aggregation bill is sky high, how easily can I switch from one log aggregator to another? Have I gotten the best of breed from 5 different vendors, but now my vendor management is a nightmare? And then how autonomous do I want to allow my teams to be, picking their own tools, their own processes, versus providing just enough structure without slowing them down? And metrics are hard. So you probably, maybe many of you have heard of the 4 big DevOps metrics. It's time to delivery, mean time to recovery, deployment failure rate, these kinds of things. And if you're pursuing those metrics just to have good numbers, it can become a spin cycle of, you're kind of a dog chasing your tail and you never know when you're good enough. And I always like to say, if you're doing these kinds of metrics without tying them directly to some business value, you might be creating the 4 horsemen of the DevOpsApocalypse, and that's so hard to say. It took me a long time to say that, DevOpsApocalypse. So again, metrics are great, but if you can't tie them to business value somehow, it's going to be a little bit of a race. Okay, so just back to me. And I did order that from Amazon. So if you're just getting started, or if you're somewhere on a journey and you want to start thinking about your delivery ecosystem this way, or evaluating the one that you have, where do you start? As an organization, do you have a traditional, and there's nothing wrong with it, a traditional infrastructure organization? Can you think about working with that organization to say, well, what are the products and services that we do deliver, and how automated are they? How much friction do we introduce? Are we having meaningful gatekeeping, or are we just trying to protect ourselves from being called at the middle of the night? And is there something else we can do to eliminate that piece of it? Do you want to invest in allowing people to experiment with infrastructure as code, this kind of thing? Do you even have the CX buy-in that maybe it's time to evolve? Or are you somewhere along the way on a known journey? My advice to everyone is always to sit down and say, well, who are my customers? Who's consuming the services that I deliver? How often do I talk to them? And then as an individual, it's the same thing, really. As an individual, what are the things that you're building? Who are the customers of those things? And how often do you talk to them? Do you really understand what their needs are? Or again, are you just trying to make sure that you have a rock-solid virtual machine provisioning capability? It's like, well, who is using that? I'm sure it's being used. If you want to get into more infrastructure as code or automation, try to repurpose something that you've already built to be more self-service. Make yourself into your own cloud provider, private cloud console kind of a thing. And join a community. Thank you for being here. This is a great community. Or if you don't have a community, make one of your own. And that is it for today. I hope that you follow our adventures, both Rosemary and I. Definitely check out Rosemary's talk. She's coming in tonight from a HashiCorp event, and I will be around. Thank you for coming to DevOps Days, and happy 5th anniversary.